$10 fine if you. All right.
Andrew's really racked them up.
I'd like to call to order the July 10th, 2017 regularly scheduled meeting of the Littleton Planning Commission. Could we please have the roll call?
Commissioner Bolt,
Here.
Commissioner Breidenbaugh,
Here.
Commissioner Corbett,
Here.
Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Kruger is not with us tonight. Commissioner Reynolds,
Here.
Commissioner Rudnicki,
Here.
Commissioner Stallman,
Here.
and Commissioner Schwartzbacher. Here.
We do have a quorum and one extra. Let's see, you've all watched the tape of the last meeting. Approval of, well, no, sorry, let's approve the agenda first. Anybody have any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, let's move on. Minutes to be approved. Do we have a motion to approve?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
We've got the picture of us, which is great, except it's just, so that's better.
Thank you. Well,
Only because I'm gonna be paying attention to like, wow, is that really?
We weren't sure if that was something new.
It's tough, but
We
anyway,
weren't sure if that was something new or, but
thank you.
with that aside, do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Robbins, a second. Any discussion? Vote, please. All set. Unanimous approval. Thank you. Next is public comment on items that are not on tonight's agenda. We do have one public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak to the Planning Commission on an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to general business, which...
Chair.
I think there is one.
Oh, we do have a list. Okay. We could have raised our hands. We have one name, Pam, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Planning Commission. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I have a block and a half from here. So it should be obvious to all of you that I'm troubled by the processes and procedures that I've seen practiced by this board since February, and prior to that, many members have been here for years longer than that. My concerns come from this. Our documents, comprehensive plan, citywide plan, are too vague and have ambiguities that allow violating applications to be approved. Or at least some of you think that, because if I were in your seats, I would have no qualms and no hesitation about voting no in many instances, which I have made publicly clear, in instances where you folks have voted yes. That's because I own property down here in downtown, and let me point out a huge weakness in the citywide plan and comprehensive plan. The CA and R5 districts were rezoned a couple of years ago, yet no revision has been made to the downtown neighborhood plan or the comprehensive plan or the citywide plan to reflect that. And in fact, those approvals were made without those being done first, which should have been done, because clearly when a zoning district is changed, it changes the nature of what can be applied for. Yet, you folks did not seek our input, the public's input, and codify that in our baseline documentation that you refer to make your decisions. This is an error, and I would like it to be corrected. I realize it takes staff time, and staff is busy. I realize that when you folks went to update the neighborhood plan for Heritage, 400 people showed up. And that is a good thing, but for us, it was a showstopper. We have not attempted a neighborhood plan update since, and that is a bad reflection on us, not a good thing. Because the point is, these documents are supposed to be built with input over time from us, the public. And we all work together to understand what's being done. We codify it clearly without ambiguity. And then we can walk away with confidence in you to implement that plan that we all have agreed on, and we understand what you're going to do. But here in downtown with the R5 and CA rezoning changes, none of that has been done. But our neighborhood said we did not want changes. Yet, every application that's come up pretty much has been approved. It's not right that 4 people make this choice. So I protest to this process, and I would like you to fix it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. That was the only name on the list. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the Planning Commission? Now seeing none, we'll go on to general business, which there is none. Next up is public hearing. PC Resolution 17-2017, resolution concerning a planned development overlay for 5630 South Curtis Street. Could we have a staff presentation, please?
Good evening, Planning Commission. I'm Jocelyn Mills, representing staff this evening from Planning Division. And yes, we are here tonight to talk about the PDO request for views at Curtis Street, and the location is 5630 South Curtis Street, which is in the CA's zone district, downtown neighborhood. So process-wise, this is their first step in the process. The PDO. Second would be subdivision exemption, and then lastly, the site development plan. So the proposal this evening is for a residential project, townhomes in 2 buildings. As I said, it's in the downtown neighborhood and in the CA zone district. And the proposal is to achieve the neighborhood compatibility and quality design through high-quality architecture, which is what they have presented to you. The picture on the right, or I think you were right, of the parking lot in the bottom, that's the current configuration of the lot, and the picture of the buildings, that's their illustrative rendering. So 6 townhomes are proposed in 2 buildings. Curtis Street, you will see there's no driveway access there. The driveway access is through and off the public alley. So in the CA zone district, in order to request an increase in height, you must propose and provide 20% minimum of unobstructed open space, and they're meeting that. This is showing that on the exhibit. Here's a picture of the proposed elevations. So what they are requesting is variations from the underlying CA zone district relative to the front setback, the predominant front setback from 25 feet to 14, to reduce the size of the required drive lane to 20 feet, and to increase the building height from 30 feet to 42.5. And as I said, the unobstructed open space is being increased to 20%, which is required in the CA district in order to increase your height. And then the project was reviewed and designed under the guidelines for the downtown neighborhood.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you go back to the last?
Sure.
Whoops, no. Talk about the building height of 30 feet to 42 in our
I think
packet,
that's
it's
an actual
40 feet.
mistake. I'm sorry?
Our packet says 40 feet as
Yes.
allowable.
So I apologize. I believe that the packet is correct, 40 feet. And then also the landscaping is provided in your packet as well. And it must be reviewed by PDO, and the intent of the PDO is to provide projects more flexible site design as long as they enhance and provide high quality architecture and design of the project. So the first request is to reduce the front setback, and here's the calculations and the documentation showing how they've gotten to their request of 14 feet. And then it was reviewed against the downtown design guidelines and standards, that the facades for the units that face Curtis Street will actually have an entrance off of Curtis Street. The ground floor shall each have a public pedestrian, or excuse me, a pedestrian walkway from the unit to the sidewalk on Curtis Street. The pitched roofs are also being proposed this evening to provide high-quality design. And then front porches are also being proposed. Then the other thing that's required is that rooftop mechanical equipment must be screened. Once we get to the site development plan, these are the details that we looked at that point. Relative to the city's comprehensive plan, the citywide plan, policy 1.9, increase the housing diversity. It's meeting that. The existing character of Old Downtown to enhance that. And based on that, staff's recommending approval this evening. I can answer any questions that you may have. I'm sorry, and there's one other thing. There was a slight typo in the resolution that was attached. That has been changed and was emailed to you, but just so you know, and the handouts are up at the back, we did change it to the correct address of 5630 South Curtis Street. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions of a technical nature for Jocelyn? Go ahead.
So the first one has to deal with pedestrian access to the buildings. So in the downtown design standards and guidelines, the 4.2.2 S1 says that the ground floor uses shall each have a public pedestrian entry directly connected to the public sidewalk, which this does not. But then going to S2, it says residential access may be off an internal court with direct access to the sidewalk. And then 42202 says to minimize conflicts between automobiles, trucks, and pedestrians in correlation to this. So my question has to deal with that the 4 townhomes, their front doors are actually directly on the private driveway. And in this case, it seems like the internal court should be pedestrian friendly because of O2, which says you need to minimize the conflict between cars and pedestrians. So the driveway really encourages that conflict. So I'm really wondering about this meeting the internal court, the intent of preventing conflict. And usually when you think of an internal court, it's more like a courtyard, which is pedestrian friendly, which this doesn't seem to be to me. So my question is your thoughts on it, looking at this way from the object of this to keep cars and pedestrians away from each other?
Yes, and I think that probably is a very good question for the applicant.
Sure.
Relative to how staff reviewed it, I believe we were thinking that you would walk closer to the entryways along underneath that eave thing, if you will, so that it would be less of a conflict. But that's a good question.
The other one is about the driveway reduction. So the exhibit used that 19-foot car, and I'm wondering what staff's, if there's any concern, because, I mean, it does cover a lot of vehicles, but it doesn't cover, like I say, a full-size pickup, which is usually another couple of feet bigger, if that would cause any issues with this. My biggest concern with this, which will probably go on to the applicant too, is if you don't make it really easy to get into the garages, the people are going to want to park on the street, and Curtis already has a lot of parking issues as it is. So that was more my question, is the staff doesn't see that this is a problem in that concern.
We did have the city's traffic engineer review this and go back and forth with the applicant. And so generally this is where they landed, feeling that this was comfortable at this location, or excuse me, in this configuration for this width.
Okay, so even with a larger pickup or something, which really wouldn't be taken in consideration with a 19-foot vehicle. Since
Right,
it's
so it
bigger.
may take them a little bit longer to get in, you're correct. But generally, based on industry standards, this was the compromise that we came to, feeling comfortable that it was workable.
Thank you. And one last question. It's a little bit long. I'm going to go into some detail of some stuff that I was thinking about, then I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
So this has to do with the 14-foot front setback. So well, one thing, this is using the applicant's numbers, and they also showed that the 0 setback, that's the side of the tavern, that's the side setback, that's for the main street. I don't think that applies for what we're looking at here, so I just point that out. So if you're looking presently at the front setback, when you average, because there's the 2 houses to the north, this piece of property, and then the 2 houses to the south. Of course, we don't use the parking lots. You actually see predominantly that setback average is closer to 17 3/4 feet. If you remove this particular piece of property, then it would be almost 16 feet. So I'm not sure about where the 14 came from in that sense. In the past, our PDO setbacks, one method we've used is, averaging the block for the front. In this particular case, it seems more like they were using the 2 to the north, which of course have the smaller setbacks. And it doesn't seem to fit with the downtown neighborhood plan. On page 6, it talks about mission creep, where we're supposed to look at the cumulative impacts that must be considered. And, if you cumulatively start creating a smaller setback and forcing houses closer to the street, that changes the character. And this plan also says that the character must be retained. So I see some potential conflict there. And also with the downtown design standard and guidelines, with the 4.2.103, it says that you need to create a generally continuous and consistent building edge to the street. But again, if you're looking at this 14-foot setback, which does mesh more with the northern buildings, you go down to the one just south of it, that's a 19.6-foot setback, and then the one beyond that. So it doesn't seem to take into account that those setbacks are actually greater. So to me, my concern is this is not meeting the design guidelines. So here's my question is, doesn't it make more sense to use the block front setback average, which seems to be more like 17 3/4 to 16 feet, instead of this 14 feet? And what average should we use, including the present setback with this piece of property, or just the 2 buildings to each side?
So your question for me is?
Is about the setbacks. Looking at
So
this.
they're proposing the 14-foot setback through this PDO.
Right, but looking at, when you look at their numbers and you don't use the tavern's side setback, that 14-foot doesn't make the average, and it seems to be more common sense that we'd want to use the average. But which average? The one that would include the property's present setback or not? That's my question to you.
When a project needs to determine the predominant setback, they use the average of the existing setbacks.
So it would include the present building there.
It should, and probably the applicant can speak to it more as to why they're proposing 14 feet in particular.
Okay, so thank you for that.
And then just generally, as you know, in the PDO section, it does say that development has to be compatible with design guidelines.
Right, which is my concern because as I mentioned, those don't seem to be being met there. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
Hi, Jocelyn. What is the height of the Valley Feed development, the new one that we just approved over by Fondue Pot?
Let's see, I think it's 42 feet, I believe.
And are the tavern and the general downtown buildings all at that same 42 height?
Oh, you know what? I'm not going to be able to answer that. I know in CA, the maximum height is 40 feet.
I'm sorry,
In the CA district, the maximum height is 3 stories or 40 feet. So generally, most everything.
this request is 42.
This request is 40, I believe. I'll have to have the applicant speak to
One
that.
says 40, one says 42.
Yeah, so I'll have the applicant speak to that.
42 is the answer to everything.
That's what I've heard, that's true, yeah. Thank you. Shall I? So again, 42 from the,
To the top. To the top.
to the top of the, okay, okay.
It's called out as 42.5, am I correct?
Again, I would like to defer to the applicant to tell you exactly how tall it is, but
Okay.
they're requesting an addition to the height, so.
Right.
It's,
Do we know how many square foot per unit the 6 units are, out of curiosity?
I do not. You'll have to ask them.
Fine. There was a letter in opposition that referenced dumpster and visitor parking issues. Do you want to speak to that at all, or is that a applicant item?
They can speak to that. We did review it based on the code, and the code requirement for multifamily in this location is 1.5 per unit. And they are
1.5
correct.
of
Parking spaces
parking.
per unit.
Okay.
And 2 spaces are being provided for each of the units.
Yeah, but that's not visitor parking.
That is correct.
So-
There is no code requirement that says you have to provide visitor parking in this particular case.
Okay. Do we know, it's probably in here and I just missed it, what's the floor area ratio vis-à-vis the, I think it's 5 to 1 in the code on the zone?
Yes, I'm sure it's probably in the table. Well, you know what, I will look it up, and the applicant tell you exactly what they're providing. But for CA, the requirement is.
5 to 1, I think.
Yes,
Yeah, okay, I didn't, that'd be great, I'd like to hear the number.
yep,
And then I think it's referencing these as townhome development, so I assume these are owner occupied and not rental units.
that's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Lastly, the citizen who came down in public comments made some provocative statements that I think for purposes of the record, you and/or the attorney may want to address in terms of the code and the comp plans and the downtown neighborhood plans have all been approved through public process. City Council has approved them. We're using what's currently in the municipal code in conjunction with our requirements. I mean, can you guys speak to that just to make sure we get on the record that this is a legally valid proceeding as opposed to something that was, I don't know, alleged otherwise?
Yes, so the code relative to a PDO does require that anything being brought before you has to be compatible with the design standards that are adopted for that area, as well as any other comp plan. And as you know, in 2014, we adopted the citywide plan, so that's the plan that we have as our comp plan. And then the downtown design guidelines and standards, it's one of the neighborhoods in that plan that was adopted, and so it was reviewed against those design standards. As far as the neighborhood plans, citywide, we did some minor amendments and cleaned those up, and I think it was 2015 that the neighborhood plans were adopted.
And the zoning and everything is as is stated?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what a rezoning, what that reference was for. I do know, I believe before I was on staff, we did bring forward an amendment to change the lot size for R5, so perhaps that's what the reference was.
Well, there was
But that was through a code amendment, so
Right,
public
that
hearing.
was a subdividing of lots in order to effectuate things like duplexes, I believe.
Correct. So maybe
But
that's
more to the point, the CA zone that we're dealing with tonight is in fact what's is the zone for this as stipulated in the code, and
That's
it's
correct.
been legally validated as a home rule municipality.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
David?
My turn?
Yes.
All right, excellent. I was confused by some of the discussion here. I thought I read that the standard for the setback in this district is the average of the other setbacks on the same side of the street. Is that correct?
Yes, generally the predominant front setback, that's how we have been interpreting that to be that side of the street, correct?
And predominant means the average
Yes.
of the other ones?
Yeah.
Do you know the range of setbacks along the street there that you would use to come up with an average?
So the ones that were used in that diagram would be
Yeah,
the
just-
ones that are the average?
Yeah, the ones that that are used to come up with the average.
Right.
What's the range of setbacks?
So if you saw that on the, it's on this, gosh, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to read it.
Missed that
If
part.
you look at the plan set, the first page, it shows you the average setbacks of all the buildings on that block face.
Oh, okay, so 5,600 is 16 feet 10 inches, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay, I got it. All right, I'll look at that. Okay, and then, let's see. So in the opposition letter, and maybe this is for the applicant, I don't know, but in the opposition letter, he had a point about car access from Curtis Street, but it looks like from the plan that the car access is from the alley. Is that
That's
right?
the proposal, yes.
Okay, yeah, so that, and then do you know what again, maybe I missed it, but do you know the other kind of neighbors materials for siding that are currently in use? I know that, I don't know if you do across the street too, but I think the terracotta, Cafe Terracotta is brick, I think. Do you know the kind of the predominant siding material used or exterior material used along that street?
Along the street,
Yeah,
I
they look like houses.
generally, I think it's a mixture of, there's some brick, just board,
Some siding,
other-
just lap siding,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Is there any stucco or anything like that?
You know, I am not going to be able to
Okay.
tell you off the top
Okay, I
of
was
my
just
head.
curious, yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Brian?
So I'm also interested in the setbacks, and so the calculation and the code is to the roof overhang, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so can you pull up the slide that you have that shows the setbacks and just sort of explain the different layers on this particular project?
So I'm sorry, so this is the slide that has it, and again, the applicant can probably further explain it since it's their diagram, but it appears that what they've provided you is a bunch of different numbers relative to roof overhangs and building wall, and how far each of those are for each of the adjacent properties from the street.
But for our purposes and in looking at the other buildings, the true setback is really the overhang or the roof line, right?
Correct, yes, for how we measure setback, yes.
Do you know if a shadow plane study was conducted, or would that be at this PDO?
I don't know, I don't believe it was, but you can speak to the applicant to see what they did in their analysis to come up with their proposal for 14 feet. If that's what you're asking?
And also the height, the building height exceeding the
Yes.
40 feet and going to 42.5, and what impact on shadow plane that might create
Yeah.
on east or west sides. But to your knowledge, you don't know of a shadow plane study?
Those were not part of your application, no, and we don't generally ask for that. Now, I agree with you, sometimes applicants have provided that when they are indicating how they're meeting certain things or providing enhanced quality design, and maybe they have some of that with them, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Concerning the building height,
That is not a mass setback height. That's just the entire ridge line of the roof, correct? For the 42?
The height that they've provided is the highest point, yeah, so to the ridge line.
But that goes all the way to the front and back of the structure.
So the 42 feet measurement, or 0.5 to 42.5, the applicant will have to verify that, would be to the very tallest roof elements.
So those are set back slightly from Curtis Street then, from the lower
Yeah.
pitched roof. Okay. The side setbacks are they 0 or are they 3 feet?
So in the CA zone district, there are no required setbacks, and there are providing some setbacks. You are correct. Yeah, so you're right. So in the land use table, they're not proposing to increase the side setbacks, but the illustrative plan does show the building being set back slightly on both the north and the south. And just to reiterate, so the proposal for the front is you have to, the predominant setback was measured to be about 25.23 feet, and they're proposing 14. So they calculated all of those, and that was the average, that 25.23%.
So right now, the design shows there is a setback, side setback that they're going to adhere to, or is that non-binding?
So the drawing in front of you is their illustrative plan, so this is generally what it would look like. But in the zoning district for CA, there is a 0 setback.
So they could go 0.
They're not proposing to create a side setback. I believe they're probably intending to have some version of a setback of the 3 to 5 feet. You're right, shown on that illustrative plan, but it's not a requirement. And then I did just see the proposed floor area ratio is 1.52 for the FAR, and then also the other thing is 30 units an acre is what they're proposing, and in CA it's 5:1 for the floor area ratio, and you can have up to 100 units per acre. So just to clarify that.
Can you repeat that, please?
So in the CA zone district, the requirement is 100 units per acre, and their proposal is 30 units per acre.
Any other questions? John? No. Jason?
This question is more likely for the applicant, but going along with the discussion on the side setbacks, the question is, how far back will the windows be from the property lines? What if the property to the north decides to build to their entitled setback of 0 feet? And that's more likely for the applicant.
Yes, for the applicant to answer, please.
That's it. Jocelyn, the width of the alley, a bit of a concern, appears to be around 10 feet wide. Is that correct? Do you have a number there? And is there an exit towards the south? It looks like it runs into some private property. Is there an easement there to get out towards the south, or is it only in and out on the north side?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't know. I will pull it up on Google Earth, but I actually don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Let's not hold it up, or do you want to take a minute to look for it, or?
How about I do that while the applicant does their presentation, or they may be able to answer it as well.
Okay. All right.
But I'll look it up for you.
And just an aside, I think according to the building codes, one would need a 3-foot setback from the side property line in order to put windows in, and they're proposing quite a few windows on both buildings. on the side property. So any closer, those openings would not be permitted. That's why it allows 0, but put windows in, you got a setback. I'm still a little confused on what establishes the larger setback. Is it the houses on the same side up and down the block? Is it an average of 2 houses to the north, two houses to the south, and across the street? What exactly sets the city standard that they're asking a change of?
It's only on that same side of the block, and it's all of the structures currently that are built on that same side of the block.
Okay, including the building that's being torn down.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other technical questions? Yeah, we have an arm raised.
Yeah, just one other one I forgot to ask. Is the city responsible for snow plowing in the alley?
We would be if it's a public. You know what, I'm going to have to ask. I don't know. I'll find that out.
Okay.
I just have a quick add-on.
Yeah.
Again, on the setback. Just to clarify, the measurement that you use is to the structure wall. I can't remember, we talked about this before, but is it to the structure wall, to the porch? I think overhangs are excluded, if I remember right.
So in Littleton's code, right now, it says any part of a structure may not be located in a setback. So that includes anything that's part of the structure. So eaves, porch,
Okay.
whatnot. If it's at grade and it's flat and you maybe have a couple flagstone pavers going to the front door, then that wouldn't count. But any version of the structure.
Okay. Got it. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions of Jocelyn? No. You're smiling. You've got some in reserve? No. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jocelyn.
I will get you some info on the alley, and
Yes.
I'll give you that here in a minute.
And Chair, just to clarify, that is a private alley. It has not been dedicated to the city.
Thank you.
Actually, the alley is public. The driveway going into the residential, Carol Kuhn, sorry, on behalf of planning, the driveway going into the units is a private, so it would not be the responsibility of the city. It would be the responsibility of the applicant, the homeowners, to develop some sort of way to plow that.
But the alley would be the
The
city.
alley is
The alley
public,
is public.
yeah. Yes, alley is public.
Okay.
Thank you. Can we have the applicant make a presentation? If you could give your name and address before you start.
Absolutely. My name is Mike Regath. This is kind of short. Permanent address 8192 Locust Drive, Littleton, Colorado. I'd like to kind of start off by telling you exactly where we started at with this project. We began, thank you for letting me speak in front of you, by the way, guys. Sorry, this is my first time up here, so.
Ours too.
We began with an 8-unit plan through conversation with city staff, planning commission, or not planning commission, planning staff, and neighbors. We narrowed it down to 6 units. Before we went to the neighborhood meeting, it was 6 units with a 10-foot setback. The height is exactly what you see before you.
Can we put this on the screen, the board here, so those in the audience can see it as well?
Okay.
Or do you have a small? You have a small version?
You
I don't
just
have a
show
small
it around
version
to
with me.
the.
Sorry?
I can pass those around if you'd like.
That's more about
It's more about the audience.
Viewing public, all 6 of them.
Cold. Have you ever watched the stats? There's at least 8. You watch the stats. It's like,
There we go.
Leave that up for you at least.
I don't know how I feel about that.
All right, back to point. We were at 6 units at the neighborhood meeting. They expressed concerns about the drive lane being accessed off of Curtis Street. Originally, the plan was to go all the way through our property to hit the public alley in the back, start off at Curtis in the front so the drivers could use the full way to back into their parking spots, drive into their parking spots, however they felt like going in there. There were concerns with access off of Curtis Street. Apparently, most of the residences along Curtis Street have only access off the alley, so we decided to compromise and access our property specifically off of the alley at that point in time. This allowed us to provide a gift to the street of a 14-foot kind of private yard or front yard that the residents could use as their own space. To access the front doors of each unit, there is a sidewalk along the underside of the overhang. If you look at the screen in front of you, there's this kind of column bay wherein there's a small gap, 4-foot wide gap, that people can walk to their front doors and safely be away from the cars in the alley, which are their neighbors, and access directly to Curtis Street, which comes in off of the center of our Curtis Street property line. Through conversations with city staff, we were informed that the setback was 25'3", give or take. 25.23, I think, is the actual number. This we were concerned with because it took into account the existing building on the property, which is significantly greater setback than the neighbors to the south and neighbors to the north. Our ideal goal is to be in the range of neighbors on both sides so that we're not detracting from the setback of the street, the consistency of the edge, and providing as much possible space of a front yard as we can. Moving on to the height, we're requesting for a 2.5 foot, from what I understand. I'm not exactly sure how to explain why we're requesting that, because I don't completely understand it myself. The way the zoning code is written, the height limit is measured to the average height of a gable. Our average height is well below that, but through conversation with city staff, we are requesting that 2.5 foot extra to the ridge of our structure. I believe that is all I have to present. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay. John, you want to?
I've actually got a follow-up here.
Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Andy Ulrey. I'm with Design Edge Architecture. Address is 600 South Harrison Street in Denver, Colorado. And I just wanted to add on a few things that Mike was stating and respond to a couple of the comments that came up during your question of staff. As Mike stated with respect to height, when you read the letter of the zoning code, to us it's very clear that it's the average of a gabled roof, not the ridge that is the height. So all throughout our design process, we were never intending for a height increase. The average is 38 feet 6 inches. So when you read the letter of the zoning code, we believe we are 18 inches shorter than the required height. Because staff still supported the project, we felt the need, okay, we will then go ahead and stick with that request because it's something that is supported by staff. The building hasn't changed, as Mike stated, since we first submitted this to neighbors at a public hearing that we had here in town, as well as that we've always gone through staff. I've designed homes in Littleton that have been, the height has been the average of a gable roof, so it came as a shock to us midway through the process that that was a change. So that is how the height has evolved, where it was, as Mr. When I say Bridenbaugh, I hope I got that right, pointed out, that is, and the height that we are requesting, or that 42.5 is at the uppermost ridge that is not consistent through the entire building. It is also stepped back from Curtis Street, and it goes up and down. The lowered ridge is, I want to say, a foot and a half below the 40 feet. That's hopefully answers the height question. With respect to the alley access, I think Mike pointed out that we started out as a continuous driveway through the site that connected the alley to Curtis. Through feedback we got at the neighborhood meeting, was a concern over that would eliminate some parking, some street parking that is, as you guys have mentioned, is valuable. So returning that and closing off Curtis, it helped us, one, from a drainage standpoint. It put traffic off of the alley, which seemed to be more desired by staff, and it created better pedestrian connectivity from the neighborhood to downtown, which, as you had mentioned, separating pedestrian traffic from vehicular traffic, that was a discussion point from staff that we thought was a good solution and a good compromise for us. I think Mike touched on the covered walkways that take you back to your door. We're talking about 6 residents. People that are coming to these residences know where they're going, so we don't see the inherent conflict between pedestrian and vehicle. Although it's there, it's always there, no matter where you're at, but we see that as a relatively safe area because the people who are going to the garages know where they're supposed to be parking. With respect to large trucks coming through, I don't drive a large truck. Even parking spaces are always a challenge, but if you can get down the alley, getting to our alley is much wider, so we felt, again, that that's not an adverse impact because the alleyway to our site is much narrower than the alleyway that we're providing within the units. I want to try to address the other questions that you had. With respect to the front setback, as it's been discussed by everyone here, including staff, it's a complicated process, and it's one of the main reasons that we went the route of the PDO. Our existing building being back so far and counting that, it's really an outlier. It's a building that is not a part of the street context. It's so far back. But we are, in the way the city calculates that front setback on a new development, it takes into account that building, even though that building will be coming down. If that building was a parking lot, it wouldn't count as anything, which, again, to us is that building, counting that building obviously hurts our property, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us to count that building because it is not within the contextual fabric of all of the other homes that are our immediate neighbors to both the north and south. So we put all of those different calculations because when you have a building surveyed, surveyors go to the built wall. They don't measure to an eave. So we measured, because of the way the city code is written, we put the porch dimension, we put the eave dimension, we put the wall dimension. Our wall dimension is actually 17 feet back, but the code dimensions to an eave or an overhang, which we don't believe is accurately counted when the properties to the north and south, because there are eaves and there are porches that stick out further. That's why all of those numbers we provided you to provide you the best amount of information that we could to arrive at the number we did. The building, we feel, locating it much more in line with the buildings to the north and south provides a much better street fabric than counting the building that was all the way to the back. I think that addresses most of the questions that you had, as well as just dovetailing onto some of the points Mike had made initially. And we also have landscape and civil here if there are any questions related to either one of those issues. Oh, I will mention the zero setback. Zero setback is what's allowed within the zoning, so we saw no need to change it within the PDO. Obviously, as many of you stated, we cannot build a wall with windows on a 0-foot setback. Our garage is at a 3-foot setback, and the residential floors are at a 5-foot setback. So, but there's no, just because the setback is 0 doesn't mean we're going to build to it. There was no reason for us to change. Our goal was to make minimal change requests to the existing CA zoning, so we saw no need to change that just because we're not going to build to it. And hopefully that answers that question.
Any other presentation from the applicant? Can we start asking questions? We'll start asking questions.
Mr. Chair, could I just inject one thing to clarify about the alley? It is a public alley. It's 12 feet wide. And you're right, it does not go through to the south. It does connect to the street to the north.
It doesn't go through as a right-of-way to the property to the south.
Correct.
But
It does.
I drove it, and nobody arrested me, but, okay.
Oversight.
Okay.
Next time.
Yeah. You go,
At least you're right over there. We know.
okay, let's see. Let's start with questions of the applicant. John, you want to start out?
My first question is, the alleyway, as just discussed, is not a through alley from north to south. So what's to prevent people from having, going out in the morning, coming in the morning? There's going to be no room for the cars to pass each other. So adding another potentially 12 cars to that alleyway when someone's trying to get in, is there anything that you can address as far as how those potential right-of-ways for vehicles going north and south on that alley?
We've done a lot of projects where traffic studies and traffic impact studies are required. The amount of residences here would not even hit on a chart. But then there's the reality of, as you described, you might have individuals accessing through the alley. Since the garages are off of what I'll call our alley, you're allowed head-in traffic then driving into the alley. You're not backing into the alley. And so the visibility, I think, is very good for people leaving our project. And just then the sheer volume, yes, the potential of 12 cars, they're never leaving at the same time. That's just another reality. And it is not a really large, significant impact. Yeah, people have to be careful. I lived in Washington Park that had a 12-foot alley, and it was challenging. It was not but you learn to live in your environment and how to manage those things. Other than that, I don't know what to say with respect to that. Is that it's a minimal impact. I think people are aware the ability to go headfirst in versus backing into it, I think, are all positives in navigating a narrow alley.
The southern end of that alley is just a fence across it right now. Is that correct?
I'm not sure there's a fence. I mean, the last time I drove it, I didn't drive it here recently, but I looped it just again to just see for my own edification as to how easy and manageable it was. I guess I may have been trespassing on somebody's property. We're not aware if there is an easement or not. It doesn't sound like that there is anything recorded, but I don't recall any gate or fence on that southern end.
So what's to prevent somebody from just driving all the way straight south? There's some kind of barrier there. It seems like last time I passed by.
You have to either take a left or a right through one of the parking lots on either side of the alley. It does not connect. I'm 90% sure it does not connect all the way to downtown.
Yeah, it goes into like the parking lot behind the tavern.
Yes.
Correct? So I don't know, maybe that's a question for staff. Just what's preventing vehicles from accessing the southern part of that alleyway?
It doesn't go all the way through to the street, so you can't access it. You end up going through the parking lot.
So could vehicles just do that, even though, there's a sign there that says?
Well, they shouldn't, because it's not public alley. It's not public right-of-way. You should go in and out from the north.
Okay. Well, I guess I have to go take a look at it and see what's preventing people from doing it, because people don't always, what they shouldn't do doesn't mean what they're going to do. The other question I had was on the pitched roofs in relation to the private drive to access the garages. to protect residents from snow and ice fall from a 40-foot. There is a covered walkway the whole length of the two buildings.
I'm going to let Mike respond to that question, but yes.
That's correct. There is a covered walkway from basically roof line on this slide to the back where trash storage will be.
It's a covered walkway that is in front of the garages, I assume, and on either side?
Yes, yes it is. It's in front of the garages, similar to what you'd find just on any street where you access off the street side. Your driveway crosses over the public-private sidewalk.
Does it show up on one of these perspectives?
It's the upper floors of the residence.
Got it.
Is your cover for the walk coming down.
And sir, anytime you talk, ask me into a microphone for the record. I realize what you're doing, but
Could you turn your
Yes,
thing around?
the second and third floors of the buildings cover the private sidewalk.
So there is nothing to prevent someone from just walking down the center of those two buildings right down where the cars would access the driveway, correct?
There is landscape strips, yes, but yeah, there is really nothing in the way of a person running right through the middle of that alley.
Is there anything in the design elements of the roof, the gabled roof, to prevent snow and ice from sloughing off and falling down into that driveway?
I mean, they're not currently in the design, but we have not wrapped up building department, drawings. Certainly, we can put snow guards, things like that, if it's a concern. We have not felt that it was, but I mean, it's a valid point and something we'll consider during our building department review. That maybe that is a good idea.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Gentlemen, using this graphic, of which there are copies in the back, or maybe you have one, using the overhead projector, can you walk us, I'd like you to walk us through a couple things. So, and I'd like to use one of these as opposed to the slides. They're a little harder to see. I think that if we use one of these and do the overhead projector.
Okay. Is it all the way up?
The words aren't important. I'd prefer you zoom in on the graphic detail as much as possible, please. Because what I'd like you to do is walk us through, the setback calculations, and show us the various setbacks that you have, and where is just an awning, and where is a wall, and things like that. Also, where the garage entrances are, because it looks like there might be some garage entrances on the actual alley, if I'm reading that correctly, or where the garage doors are. And then specifically, as a layman might, show me how people would walk to the 4 units that are on the more eastern side of the driveway.
All right.
The lot.
Okay. I'll start with the setbacks. The dashed over, wow, that's really big. The dashed line on the outside is the overhang line. The bold kind of gray line is the wall. So each of those is depicted by the numbers adjacent, 1610 in this case to the wall, 1410 to the awning in the setback. That proceeds all the way down to the tavern, which is not included, but it is, we felt it was necessary to show it just for context. There are 2 parking lots at these 2 lots. They do not count towards the setback, from our understanding. And then There is a pair of dashed lines in the center here indicating the existing building setbacks, and that is 43'4" to the wall and 41'4" to the overhang, kind of on the corner covering their main entry.
And on your proposed PDO, can you just walk us through the various lines there? So I understand the contextual, that's helpful, but.
Sure. The foremost line is the 14-foot setback that we're asking for, and that is measured to the balcony at the front. The next line over is a 15-foot setback to the overhang. The third line over is the actual distance to the front wall, which is going to be at 17 feet. To access the buildings, drive lane-wise, you come down the alley, approximately here, here, and here is access to the garages.
Okay, so there are no garage doors on the alley?
Correct.
Okay. And then how does one walk?
Coming from Curtis Street, you can walk along the sidewalk, across, underneath the second and third levels, back to the alley.
So that's the overhang there, that it's,
Correct.
the upper levels of the residences are covering that walkway, but you are walking past garage doors.
That is correct.
To get to 4 front entrances, 4 front doors that are on the central.
2 on each building, yes.
Okay. Are there doors on the north and south side of the building, or just windows?
On the north, do you mean the side setback, the absolute
Yes,
side setback?
yes.
No, those will be just windows.
Just windows, egress windows?
Yes. Egress windows, convenience windows, windows for pretty pictures.
Okay. And then I understand from a design perspective why the porches, because the front porches are really the elements that are 14
Correct.
feet, right? Those
Yes.
are the closest to
Yes.
the setbacks. Are those necessary to be a certain depth?
For usability, 3 feet is probably the minimum that you want. Then it's only standing room. Fortunately, in our case, we have a setback around the corner here, wherein the majority of that balcony would lie. So that would be at about 5 foot depth.
Okay. And then my last question is 42 and a half feet really necessary? Or is that just the way that the roof pitches worked out and you guys thought that that was appropriate in the calculation? Or could 40 work in your design?
The steepness of the roof pitch is in place to, and I'm going to get the term wrong, but there's the architectural standards of the downtown area, and to have that usability, and we felt that pitch was the right context. To lower that pitch complicates it. And again, like I said, if you read the letter of the zoning code, we're not violating the height restriction. It's just, it came up here late, and we conceded on it because, again, we had support of the staff to do so. So if you read the letter of the zoning code, I do not believe we're violating the height restriction because it's the average of a pitched roof, not the ridge that is the calculation when you read it word for word.
Is there anything in those pitched roofs, or are they just attic?
Access to a rooftop deck,
Oh, so you come up in that way?
yes.
So it's kind of ironic, they're called the views on Curtis Street, but those pitches actually block your western views.
A little ironic, yes. Yeah. There's a nice view of downtown, there's nice views to the
Sure.
north.
All right, thank you.
David?
Just a couple of quick questions. On that rendering there, I mean, I know this is all illustrative, but on that rendering there, is that a privacy wall? Yeah. I can't.
The wall he's indicating is kind of this brownish color on our rendering. It is a privacy fence, a 6-foot-high privacy fence, typical to what you'd see on any residential.
Okay. And what's the setback? Are you planning on doing that? I just didn't see it in this, in
Yes.
these pages.
Yes, we are.
What's the setback between the wall and the property line?
It is on the property line.
On the property line, okay. And is there one on the other side too?
Yes.
Okay. And then I don't know who wrote this, I didn't see setbacks in your in your application, and maybe this is a question for staff, because in the legislative text, there's a list of setbacks, and I understand, not requesting any setback change in the PDO. So then on the density section, it says the PDO is requesting 29.33. I understand that's the density of the building that you're proposing, but is that going to be a restriction on the PDO, or will it remain at 100 dwelling units per acre for future?
I don't see any reason to try to change the existing zoning code. Getting 100 dwelling units per acre on this site would be difficult.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just don't see a reason why we need to change it. The architect basically said the same thing regarding the side setbacks, that there's no need to change it. So that was my only question on that. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's my only question. Thanks.
Bruce?
Well, I guess a sort of a sidebar for staff. So you guys want to address this average gable thing? Height average?
Yeah, so it's our position, our strong position, that is the highest gable is the one we measure from, and that's based on our reading in front of us of the height of the structure. And I'll just read it for you for your edification. The height of the structure is the vertical distance above the reference datum measured to the highest point of the coping on a flat roof, or the deck line of a mansard roof, or, and here's the important part I think we're getting to, or to the average height of the highest gable, notice that's singular and not plural, of a pitched or hipped roof. So that's what it says now. I would also point out that we are currently have noticed a change to this language that would make it very clear that is the highest point, period, no average. So there's an argument also we have that pending ordinance doctrine would say that it's the highest point, period, and not an average.
Okay, but you're saying the highest point, period, is proposed language that we were trying to clean up?
We're trying to clean up because the way this reads to us right now is the highest, it's the average height of the highest gable, and that's singular. And so what we're thinking in the code is written is if you had 4 sides, that would be the highest of each of those highest points. But when you have a building like this where it's one line, it's the highest gable singular.
Saying the average of 4 42s is 42?
Correct. And so if it was more on a sloped lot, you may have different averages based on that facade. So really on a flat,
yes,
generally flat.
He's saying, if I understand what they're saying, but he can address it, if it's 42, if it's, I guess it's, whatever that would be, 34 to 42, the average ends up being 38 or something, but I don't know where the lower number would be.
What I believe the applicant is saying is if you took the average of all the different peaks of that roof line, it would be below that 40. But the way we interpret the code and the way we are proposing to change it here, and we've already noticed it, it would be the highest gable, not any averages.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks for the clarification. As far a couple quick questions for the applicant, if you please. 3 things, I think. These, just the confirmation that these are, well, real quickly, how many, so you got 6 units in here. What's the square footage of each unit, roughly?
The average between 1725 and 1875.
Okay. And they're townhomes, so they're owner occupied. So talk about, and I think this is actually an important element of this potential project. Given the state of construction defect legislation or statutes in Colorado, and the fact that a variety of municipalities, including Littleton, have tried to address that issue to encourage, as a home home rule municipality encourage more townhome construction, of which we've had pretty much nil over the past 10 years. Why are you guys choosing to do townhome instead of apartment rental?
You have to ask the owner specifically, but I think their intent always was, when they bought this property, was to, they're more in the home sale business than they are the apartment business. It's people who are apartment developers are different than people who are for sale developers, and I can't speak to why, the different reasons. I would also tell you that I think the laws are changing regarding that. I know for me personally, my insurance is different when you have, based on unit count. You have unit counts that are above 25, the insurance changes. When you have a 6-unit project, it's viewed differently by the insurance companies. In the comprehensive plan, the need and the demand for sale housing of this type is there. That's why I think my client bought this property to begin with. It fit a need, it fit a demand. They are for sale builders, and so that's what they do. I don't know if that really answers your question, but.
No, I think that's very helpful. I appreciate that. The density issue, I think, is also important. Your associate mentioned it would be hard on this property to get 100 dwelling units per gross acre. What high-end number would not be hard to get to if you were really so motivated to put, 600 square foot apartment building units in there?
Well, at 1,800 square foot a unit, we're at 6, you divide it by 3, it's 18.
Okay.
So I think you couldn't park it unless there was some sort of TOD parking requirement or, a near downtown parking requirement that exists in some other jurisdictions. I'm not aware of one in Littleton that does that. That's why we started initially at the 8. We felt we could still do 8 with a 10-foot setback and still get 2 cars per household. Even though the zoning only requires 1.5, we have to deal with the realities of how do you sell half a space, or does somebody buy a home that has half a space? You really need to be, although this is an urban context and nobody knows where vehicles are going in the next 25 years, they still are here right now, and people have 2 cars.
Okay, all right. And then I think the last question I've got is the development standards vis-a-vis Code Section 10-9-5 talk about attention to creative, high-quality design and to producing a development that reinforces and complements citywide neighborhood design goals and objectives. So your application goes pretty deep on the design guidelines, but talk about how you are addressing the quality, high-quality design and creative. And I think there's a couple ways we've had in the past to talk about high-quality design. Some of it has to do with the design, the architectural rendering of the project. Some of it has to do with the quality of materials. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I may have Mike add to this, but what I would say is what we have tried to do is use traditional forms that conform to the downtown area and guidelines, but use a little bit of more contemporary materials that you see today. There's some stain grade siding that you see, the enhanced balconies, the way it presents itself to the street. We believe it's really four-sided. When you look at the sides, you can see a lot of sides, sometimes just one flat wall. We have change in roof line, we have change of plane, we have things that take a long wall and add some visual interest to it versus just maximizing square footage, building straight up and not having those variations, which we think add to the visual interest on all sides, as well as it really defines, I think, 3 separate units a little better than one massive building.
Okay. Okay, thanks much.
Andrew?
I grew up in the north, and when it snows and there are narrow alleys, they become ice rinks. When I noticed if you could bring up the second drawing you have there, it says that you're going to plow all of the snow to the westernmost edge, which theoretically, as we see here on the renderings, is buffered by hedge. So that would make the snow melt into a covered alley for a long time. How are you going to prevent that from happening?
On any of these infill projects, snow removal is a challenge. I have some properties up in Silverthorne, and the plow systems used there are a little bit different to manage the volumes of snow that we have here. Fortunately, I would say in the Front Range, I don't know where in the north, but it's not like the north where snow sticks around it snows one day and it's 60 degrees the next. We do have that advantage. It's not an easy solution, just like, parking and access and things like that. I think there will be good western exposure to the sun when it is plowed in that direction. I don't know if there's anything, Eric, you want to add to that?
The sun's awful low that time of year.
Yeah.
That would be an alley that never sees a ray of light.
I would think that it would still see sun from the
Lived
west.
here for
But
15 years, it would never see a ray of light. We had a line about the shadow. Have you considered how this property relates to the existing properties regarding their shadowing and their ability to maintain their presence?
we did not do a shadow study as staff had stated. It was not asked, and it was just something we just didn't do.
And could you describe the front landscaping? There's a couple trees in your rendering, but is there any true buffering between that alley and the street itself?
I'm going to turn that over to one of the landscape architects to let them answer that question.
Hi, I'm Kristen Hegum. I'm the senior landscape architect for Altitude. We were the consultant on the project. I don't know
Ma'am, what's your address?
2009 North Franklin Street in Colorado Springs.
Thank you.
I don't know what's in your packet, but I have our landscape plan that was submitted. So our landscape plan.
Put it on the screen there.
Oh, yeah.
Right there. Perfect. And so my question is truly the buffer from the street to that alley.
Buffer from the street to the alley. So you see in the right-of-way, there is a proposed lawn area, and at the very bottom of the drawing with the big circle, that is a street tree. And then we have the sidewalk.
Existing street tree?
No, proposed street tree. And then we have the sidewalk, and then we have the individual walkways, the three heading from west to east into the buildings and into the alleyway. And those, in between those walkways are more lawn area, and then we do have kind of a mixed shrub bed up against the buildings and at the end of that alleyway. And one more proposed tree there, and the plantings that are around that tree at the end, at the west end of that alley, would all be low plantings where snow could be piled there until it melts.
So everything in that little arrow section there is in essence where the snow will be?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then what is the thickness and height of the PUW1 bushes?
PUW1. PUW1 is a dwarf spirea bush, so those get about 30 inches tall and about 5 feet wide, so short and squat, evergreen.
So my question, I guess, is really aiming towards, will the alley be shielded from the street, or will the alley be exposed to the street?
I'm just looking at the height because it's a mixed bed. It's not all one. It's not like a solid hedge going across. So I was just going to look at the other plants to tell you what they are. Okay, so underneath the tree, and the tree is a flowering crabapple, and all the heights and widths are on our planting legend. So that tree, for instance, that is at the west end of the alleyway is about 25 feet tall, 25 feet wide. We have some ground covers in there that only get about 8 inches tall. We have CAK, sorry. Those are Calamagrostis. Those are grasses. They get about 3 feet tall. So that's probably the most screening you're going to get. There is a row of grasses across that west end of the alley. So during spring, summer, fall, they will be about 42 inches tall or so. And those are solid across, but of course in the winter they go dormant, and that would allow the snow to be piled up in that area.
Good, I'm good.
Rob?
Commissioners, I just want to add one thing to this. As you know, in the PDO plan set, it does make a statement, which is accurate, that the landscaping in your PDO plan set is illustrative for this point in the process. At site development plan was when staff will review all of the detail and approve the landscape plan, just so you know.
Are we done with this?
You done?
Thank you.
Okay.
Robin, do you have a
Yes, I
question?
do. I'm just waiting for
Waiting
someone
for him
to
to come
come
up?
up to the front.
Stand
I
off
could
here.
ask my questions to nobody, but it seems not so good. So you did, or you or the other gentleman did discuss a little bit about the pedestrian access. So it sounds like your contention is having that eaves over the garage is supposed to designate where the people are walking to get to their doors. Is that accurate, or did I misunderstand?
That's accurate.
How do you, going back to our downtown design standards and guidelines where it's specifically saying about not having conflicts with cars and pedestrians and the inner court, I'm still not seeing how this actually prevents that.
Well, I guess there's a change in paving, correct? I mean, the paving treatment changes, and the cars would be, other than pulling in and out of their specific garage, would be driving over the top of the sidewalk if they were so driving that width. Again, we felt that there were always trade-offs on any one of these projects, that eliminating the access through, which could have been used as we described at the other end of the block, a cut through, where somebody's frustrated, there's a XL truck working in the alley, all right, I'm just gonna fly through. Eliminating that cut through was a step in that direction of protecting pedestrian and having, again, working with staff to have a good pedestrian connection to the downtown really minimizes the amount of traffic, pedestrian traffic and cross vehicular traffic, and it limits it to people who are coming here who know where they're going. They're to the residents. Sure, they have visitors and things like that, but the sidewalks, I think, are very well designated because of the pavement changes in material color. I think there's lots of visual cues and a lot of traffic analysis of traffic calming devices. When you change colors and patterns, that it makes cars slow down versus just putting speed bumps and things like that makes cars want to speed up in between them and annoys people. So those kind of calming devices, I think, help. Plus, this really is a private driveway. We call it an alley. We've called it a lot of different names, but it's a private driveway for these individuals. So we don't see the risk as any greater than the people at my own house if kids are playing on the driveway or something. That I know where I'm going. I know where my garage is. It's really limited to the people that live there and know what they're doing.
Thank you. I like that you're putting the pavement treatment. That does make a big difference. And eliminating the cut-through does. So I think that satisfies that. I'd like to go back to the 14-foot front setback. So when I take your numbers and the numbers that are going out to all the way out to the end of the structure, which is, the eave off of the porch, I don't come up with 14 feet. I just checked my calculations. I come up with 17.71. I don't understand where you came up with 14 feet.
No, the 14 is a request for a variance. That is why, that is one of the elements in the PDO. If we were at 17, we wouldn't be here. We would go, it would be one of those, we would adhere to the site plan. So you're correct, it doesn't add up to that. The added one is or less than that. And the allowed setback in this zone district is 10 feet. And that's where, again, when we came in starting with this process, that's where we wanted to be. We've since, through, again, compromise with the neighbor, compromise with staff, getting to that 14 to the eve. And again, I know the code reads that way, but we can certainly pull eaves back, and the wall to us is what's more being in line with the wall to your neighbors. The eaves, we have a 2-foot overhang. Could we shorten that to a 6-inch? Sure, and bring it a little bit shorter. I think that though those shorter overhangs make for less attractive architecture. Same with the balcony and the front porch. That was working with staff to provide a presence to the street. And so those elements being that more into the setback.
Okay, I appreciate that. My concern is when you get into the design standards and guidelines and what the downtown neighborhood plan is, the 14 feet doesn't necessarily match up with that. And as a planning commissioner, when you look at what the PDO allows, it has to coincide with that. It has to reinforce that. So when I'm looking at what you're doing, then I'm looking at that. So one of the aspects of that is, it talks about creating a continuous and consistent building edge, where if you look at the front two on the north side, and they are a lot closer than the other two, if you want a continuous edge, do you want to make them meld together more? Those are the things that I'm looking at for that when I'm looking at what this is telling me. And also, one of the things that the downtown neighborhood plan says is the neighborhood's character must be retained, and that's what it says, must be retained. And it also says that I have to take into consideration cumulative impacts, mission creep. So if I'm looking at the present building right now and where it's at, the mission creep is now we're bringing buildings closer and closer to the street. Say another building, like say the one next to it, sells and they decide to demolish it. And does that mean the mission creep brings those buildings closer and closer to the street? How does that actually affect the character of the street? So, and these are what the design standards are talking about, both the neighborhood plan and the design standards and guidelines. So that's why I'm really concerned with the 14-foot. In the past, we've usually averaged that, which seems to meet those, and I'm just not sure the 14-foot meets that from what I'm reading. That's why I'm just throwing out you. I am so concerned about that particular 14 feet. I hear you with about, cutting back the eaves. You're right, aesthetically speaking, you want it to add those, especially when you look at what the design standards and guidelines are for this particular street. They're very specific on how it has to look, and that's part of it right there. So that's why I'm mulling over that 14-foot. I appreciate what you're trying to do there. I'm just not sure it meets those standards and guidelines in that sense. So, as a PDO, one of the things that a benefit has to be given to the city, right? It specifically says, and I'll just read it here as soon as I can find it. Maybe I should put on my glasses. It talks about the city having a substantial benefit. I was just curious how you saw this project as being a substantial benefit to the city of Littleton.
Should I go?
Go for it.
I think there's a substantial benefit in several ways. 6 more homeowners into the city of Littleton, I think, is a substantial benefit. As the one gentleman had mentioned, you don't see this, and it's something that's strongly encouraged in your, again, I can't remember if yours says comprehensive plan or plan, but the plan for the city, homeownership is encouraged, and diversity of housing types are encouraged. On a more nuts and bolts level, the elimination of a large parking lot and giving street parking back is a tangible, it's not a great gift, but it's a gift. I mean, you know, we all get gifts that aren't the best thing for Christmas, but it's a gift of parking spaces back. Having that pedestrian connectivity across that parking lot that was there, we view as a substantial increase in quality to the existing building that is currently there. That building, again, being as an outlier really affects that setback. And I understand that's how your code's written and that's how you're looking at it. But a building, and Mike, what is it, 50 feet? 43 feet back, to account for that in the average, when you look across the street, when the zoning district allows for 10 feet, across the street you have buildings that are 10 feet, you know, back from the, I would say this building now is much more contextual than the existing building that currently occupies the site.
No, those are all good points. And I also would suggest that adding more parking spaces is also a benefit to, you know, getting rid of that there so that you can add more parking spaces. So you know that Littleton's recently had a housing study completed, and that it shows that we have a very good balance of housing, and it showed 2 types of housing that we need, and one of them is the single-story home for seniors to stay in place. Obviously, that doesn't fit this. But the other one is we need houses that fall within the $300,000 range or less. Any chance these fall into that range? Yeah, I'm laughing a little too.
I'm not aware of the sale price, but I can tell you it's not.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. But I just thought I'd ask, because that's what Littleton, according to the housing study, one of the things that we really do need.
That's the state of Colorado, not just Littleton.
I agree with you. So I'm going to go back to the height. I understand your point of view from the height, but I have to listen, you know, to our city. That's who's, you know, making this call. And so there's.
Read that one more time so you guys can all hear exactly
Sure,
what it says.
go for it. However.
We can read it, but it's still the top of
Same
the
stuff.
gable, so.
It is still your opinion that, I mean, you guys.
Between average and top. I mean, that, I don't know. That's so.
Jocelyn, could you just, rather than reading it again, which is difficult to, could you just, somebody make 8 quick copies here for us to take a peek at?
So I think it says the average height of the highest gable, so it's the top of the highest gable, which is 42.5 feet in this instance.
And that's what I have to go by. That's what the city goes by. So if other applicants come up, you know, they have to, that's what they're going to be going by also. Correct, Jocelyn?
That is correct.
So here's my concern with the.
And I
Upside
would
down.
just say it very,
Flip it around.
very distinctly defines the top of a flat roof. So most jurisdictions acknowledge that flat roof of a rectangle at 42 or 40 feet height is a much larger impact to adjacent properties than one with a gabled roof. That's why it is written that way as the average. And I think, average is not a debatable word. I mean,
Excuse
average
me?
is average. And so, you know, again, it's, I don't know, you know, what to say. I mean, I can tell you I've designed homes in Littleton where they've taken the average house. So this is a new thing for me personally.
And for the commission's benefit, we're changing this. It's already been noticed. Pending ordinance doctrine is already in effect. It's our interpretation now and for everything going forward that it's going to be the highest gable, and our code will reflect that very soon.
I
mean,
appreciate.
I'm fighting for the height, but I mean, I know, can we make it work at 40 feet? Yes. Is it a better product at 42.6? Yes. Does it adhere to the letter of the zoning code? Yes. And I guess there's no more point really debating the height.
No, but I'm clarifying because I have to go by what I'm reading here and what you're saying and, what you're presenting. And again, one of the things that's in our downtown neighborhood plan is we have to look at the cumulative impacts of what you're asking for. And you are asking for 2.5 feet on top of a already 40-foot building. And when you look into our downtown neighborhood plan, for this particular neighborhood, not the downtown standards and guidelines, this is a downtown plan, it specifically says the height criteria is chosen to keep the character of this neighborhood. So if you're asking for 2.5 more feet, that changes now the average in what this street looks like. What if the next person says, oh, well, you got 42.5, I want 42.5. Well, you got 42.5, I want 45. That's what the cumulative impacts are looking at. That's why the height is really important to me, because of what the downtown guidelines for this specific neighborhood say. So it is a big deal, the extra 2.5 feet. When you look at, we're having homes that are being demolished in our community, and they are taking away the original cute cottage homes, or the homes that have more of a Victorian style, and they're building a lot of townhomes like this. And that specifically starts to change our character. Everyone's asking for variances. I want less setback here. I want greater height here. This is impacting our community. So that's why this, to me, is a big deal. And it also is something I have to look at, because that's what it says in our downtown neighborhood plan for this particular neighborhood. So height is a big deal.
Yeah, and let's close with that. I mean, it was never our intent to ask for a height increase, because I know height is important. And we've just always felt we were adhering to the height code. So
yeah, it's
not,
unfortunate.
We can certainly look at that.
Well, it's unfortunate to have the difference of opinion in that way, because you designed to what you thought was accurate. You had the best intentions. You weren't trying to, pull the wool over or change anything. You had the best intentions, and I hear that. The other thing is when you look at our guidelines, for the sub-area 4, you are required to do a lot of things which you're showing in here. So it's not like you have the option simply to get rid of certain things, because there are requirements. So the gables here are part of what this character looks like. I'm going to go on to and you guys are probably getting ready for me to be done. My last comment is on the character of this neighborhood. So I'm assuming you read the downtown neighborhood plan for this, and you've also read the downtown standards and guidelines. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through the details, but it's really specific. In this neighborhood, it has to retain the character it has now. And my concern is while you have form that fits it, there's a lot of contemporary elements here that is not the same as the rest of the community. And if I know you're saying in your plan on page 1 that you see the traditional form with some contemporary colors and materials, but I see a lot more contemporariness when I'm looking at this. The downtown standards and guidelines say you should have the big windows. You have some really nice smaller windows. You're talking about where the stairs are. Those look nice, but that's contemporary. Does it really fit the neighborhood? You're across the street, you have an historical home, the terracotta there. Down the street you have Spotswood, and the idea for this neighborhood is to keep that character. It specifically says in there that the homes here were built in the early 1900s or shortly after World War II. There are small cottages, late Victorian houses, and ranch-style homes along tree-lined streets. Most have shallow front and backyards. It is rare to have a cohesive older neighborhood like this one so close to a thriving downtown. This neighborhood is stable and will retain its character. I don't see this as fitting in with the character. It's the contemporary elements to me don't seem to match it, and that's my other concern. I would say that doesn't fit in with the character of the neighborhood from what I'm looking at. Please feel free to say what your thoughts are.
Sure. We do some work in some landmark areas and historic areas, and a lot of the direction we get within those areas is, again, traditional forms and things, but you need to build as if it was being built today. We don't try to replicate something 90 years ago because building technologies have changed, the way materials have changed, things of that nature. So it's of our opinion that form is more important and the most important. Some of the material specifications, we're trying to find that balance of, to appeal to a broad audience from a for sale standpoint. I mean, who is buying this? Is this, somebody who wants to downsize out of their larger home but wants to be near downtown? Is it a young millennial who's a young couple? We don't know exactly who the demographic is. Obviously, they will sell to anybody that would want to buy. But trying to find that balance of a little older charm with some newer materials has been the goal. And I think, again, from not to go back always to where we were, you would have really not liked what we had in the very beginning from a contemporary standpoint, but trying to strike that balance between what we feel will sell within the marketplace and what works well with the downtown, and worked a lot with staff, probably multiple iterations of elevations to come to where we are today, and we feel very proud of it and think it does do both.
It is a nice-looking building. I don't disagree. I'm just not sure it meets the character. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Comments?
Jason?
I have more of a question for staff. Could staff please clarify which district of the downtown plan this is in? There's some ambiguity in the street layout on page 10 of the plan. And to be a little bit more specific, I guess looking at that plan, it appears that south of West Powers Avenue is part of the residential mixed-use area as opposed to the old downtown neighborhood.
I said the same thing. I think you're dealing with that, not that. And this is way different.
Pulling out the plan, just a minute.
And this is the time for questioning the applicant, so if you want to go ahead and question the applicant, we can get back to you on that.
No further questions.
While you're looking that up, I have some questions of you guys. These questions are going to lead to heights of the building. Currently, it looks like you have a ceiling height of 9 feet on the main level. What's your ceiling height on the second level?
On the ground level, we are at a 9 foot, second level 9 foot, third level 9 foot.
Okay.
For the majority. Half of it is sitting under the rooftop deck. That's at about an 8 foot ceiling.
Okay. So you have nine on the garage level. Okay, I'm not even counting that, but main level is 9 feet. Upper level is also 9 feet.
Correct.
Okay. What's the, well, I'm just thinking if you could go down to 8 feet on your third level, which is very typical on these kinds of projects, lower your roof pitch a little bit, you can meet the 40-foot height. It looks like you're asking for some of the 42-foot height, 42.5-foot height in order to get some kind of window and door out to this deck. Any rate, that's my observation of your heights. What is the width of your garage doors?
Garage doors are 18 foot.
18-foot garage doors? Okay.
That's to conform with the 9 foot wide parking stall.
Okay. Yeah, I thought they were 16, which would, looks like your side areas where you drive in, you could barely open the garage door or the car door, maybe halfway before you hit a wall. It's very tight.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the 20-foot drive width. I don't know what the engineer was looking at, city engineer. I'm looking at it considering a 19-foot. Nobody better have a 19-foot car here. You're going to need smaller cars, unless or you're going to be K-turning into your garage. It's I don't care what your arcs say, you're inches away from nailing the car next to you in the garage. So there's a bit of concern for the driveway width. Somewhere, and I can't find it, you talked about, you trumped up the, lowering the driveway width from 23 foot to 20 foot would allow more, less concrete. But you obviously fill it up with buildings, so it really doesn't make a difference whether it's 23 feet or 20 feet. You're still covering that lot.
The reason for the reduction was to allow for pedestrian access along the side there between the garage door and the kind of drive lane. So door to door, it's really 28 feet in change. Between the columns in elevation, let me zoom in on this a little bit more.
Okay, those columns go all the way down. They're columns holding up, is that cantilevered, or does those columns hold up the entire second floor?
The columns do support it.
I'm sorry?
They do support it.
So every 15, 20 feet you have a column?
20 feet, and then we've got, if you look at the front elevation of the building, it's kind of a 20 foot around the garage.
Yeah.
And then give or take 10 to 15 at the front door. It kind of narrows up there.
Okay, so let's say garage door to garage door is like 28 feet?
33? 33, I believe, is the middle one, which is the smallest.
I mean, garage.
Oh,
opposite.
garage door. Garage door to garage door is 28, correct.
28 feet, yeah. You're, really don't have a floor plan. We just have a luster of let's say, building footprint, so it's difficult to see what's going on with that driveway. Thank you for clearing that up. Where does your trash go? It looks like I got about a 3-foot setback to the alley. I assume that's where it gets stacked?
So trash will be stacked along a 5-foot sidewalk at the back.
Okay.
If
Will be the owner of that unit. He's going to have trash cans.
Well, that's temporary storage on trash pickup days. The owners are responsible for putting it in their garage wherever they need to put it.
I understand. Okay. Just the last point, I think it's a waste of time arguing the height limit. The city always, every city interprets their code as they see fit. They say 40 feet, it will be 40 feet. And that's it. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, can I just confirm that these would be for sale condominium units, and would there be an HOA that would manage rules like no parking in the driveway, that would manage snow removal, manage trash?
Yes.
Pickup. So HOA governed. Does this developer have track record of writing HOA documents that stick?
We have several projects like this in the works. We're going through that HOA process on all of them. So as far as history, no, but it's as you mentioned, it's a necessary part of the development.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. Next will be public comment. I'll ask the commissioners, would you like to take a break now? And we've been at it almost 2 hours.
Mr.
Take a
Chair,
10-minute.
may I just answer the question about the neighborhood plan before you take a break?
Go
Would
ahead.
that be all right? So we did look at that document, and we would agree it's difficult to sort of read it, but it does appear that it's in sub-area 4, which is the mixed-use, residential mixed-use district, to verify. Thank you.
Thank you. Any objection to taking a 5-minute break?
No objection.
Seeing none. 5-minute break, and we'll be back on time. Do that to me.
Apparently so.
Okay.
There it is.
Thank you. Okay, next we have a public comment period. Let's see, we do have a list here somewhere.
Underneath the other one? No?
Is it this one? General business.
You guys were.
That one right there?
There it is. Oh.
One on top. Is it that one? It's cleverly
Cut off my
concealed.
nose to, yeah, very cleverly put right in front of me. We do have, let's see, 3 names, people that have signed up. If you haven't signed up, you can speak at the end. First, we have Jim Hathaway, who's against the project, wishes to speak.
Hi, I'm Jim Hathaway. My office is at 5630 South Curtis Street, just south of the property that's in question, and I live at 6338 South Race Court in Centennial. I own Brothers Construction. It's a business that I've owned since 1978. So I've been finishing basements since then, and we bought that building actually originally as a house for my parents to live in when they were still alive. I converted it into an office and went through a rezoning process. It was always CA, but I rezoned it as a commercial building about 8 years ago, something like that. So I always had in mind that it would create a character and a kind of a definition for my company, and I've advertised it as such on my website, which is historic downtown Littleton, you know, with that kind of ambiance, that kind of feeling, that kind of personality. And as was mentioned by Ms. Schwarzbacher, that I feel is going to be severely compromised by this particular proposed building. And I might just say, if I could, as kind of a general observation of the proceedings so far, I think it's really apparent from what you've all asked and what has been discussed, that there are a lot of unresolved issues here. And these are not small issues. These are big issues to me. I think it's been apparent from your questions that either you weren't satisfactorily answered or you haven't had the time to do the research necessary to really understand the situation that is involved here. So I really would hope that you would not make a decision on this PDO tonight. I think there should be a continuance of the process. Otherwise, I think it's really going to be a severe compromise. It's going to actually be a travesty, I think, of what kind of process this should be, where these questions that are serious are answered, and I don't think they have been answered. I certainly can't answer them in 3 minutes. I can bring you up some more, but some of them have already been brought up, and if they are left unanswered the way they are at this point, I really think that would be a problem, not just for this community directly connected, but even for the city as a whole. I think it would really be a travesty. So just to answer a couple things, because I could tell from some of the answers and the questions you had that were not given specifically that a lot of these things are unknown to you guys and ladies. For instance, the alley situation. The alley situation will be exacerbated into a nightmare if this thing happens. Just let me give you an example. Well, the way it is, because I'm back up to the alley, I have a storage building right at the alley. The parking lot has the ability to, and often does, shut off the entrance at Nevada so that you cannot get in and out there because it's a valet parking situation, right? So that they don't let you in and out. You literally have to run over the cones, run over the sign, which I've done a few times, but I don't think you want that to be a regular occurrence. So there is definitely not a practical north-south traveling pattern that is available to these people.
Your 3 minutes are up, sir.
I beg your pardon?
Your 3 minutes are up. Could you finish up quickly?
No. I mean, if that's really the way you want to do it.
That's the way we do it. Thank you. Pam? Yeah, by the way, we have a yellow and red card here. Yellow card is when there's 30 seconds left, and red card is when the 3 minutes is up.
Fortunately, I did pick sub-area 4, so a few things. Oh, Pam Chadbourne, I live a block and a half from here, and definitely am affected by downtown. All of our property values downtown are affected by all of this infill redevelopment. And my point, Mr. Stallman, was that we have not readdressed our design documents for the R5 and CA rezoning, or for the infill that's happening now. So all of these exceptions accumulate, and thank you, Commissioner Schwartzbacher, for bringing this up. It's the accumulated impact that matters. The system of downtown is being attacked and undermined by each one of these. Because if you add them together, as, thank you to two of you, the proximity of these ruins the feel of downtown, which all of the setbacks are designed to create space and air and light. And that's what it does now. And by eroding them lot by lot, which is the wrong way to do it, we destroy the character of downtown. Or I'm going to say you, because it's not me. I always speak against it. So look, my high school friend grew up at the end of this block. It's a beautiful home. It doesn't have historic status. I assume the owners don't want to, but it has character, yet not like this. So the character must be maintained of downtown. That is a document that you must comply with. So should staff, and I don't know why this got this far, but mission creep, let me point out, this is an example of undesirable change in the perceived line of roofs. Look at that roof. It's not even setbacks here, because the setback comes out too, but the roof is undesirable change. And this is in the part of standards that says blending into the existing characters preferred because the size of the subarea is too small to absorb many differing forms without losing an identifiable character. And let me just point out, the majority of the building facade should be oriented parallel to the street on which it fronts, and these don't. In fact, they wall themselves off from Curtis. As was pointed out, residential access may be off internal courts. I'm going to tell you that's not a driveway, and the attorney even referred to it as a private driveway. These are not internal courts. This is not the character of Littleton. The ground floor entry shall each have a public pedestrian entry, and these are standards which staff has previously said must be met. And this applies to this. This is a PDO. Planning Commission, I would have no problem voting against this. I would have to vote against this because of these documents, which staff has not presented to you, but I will. Or continue to consider them, please, and refuse this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. George, I can't make out the last name, for the project, does not wish to speak.
He's not here. Oh.
Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak for the Planning Commission that hasn't signed up? Seeing none, let's see. Applicant, do you wish to respond to any of the comments of the public or make any last comments?
Thank you all again for the opportunity to come here this evening. I would like to say that we strongly believe that our project, in context with the existing building that there, is a tremendous improvement. It's an asset to the neighborhood. It adds home ownership. It improves the streetscape. We are, there's been two concerns, obviously, over setback and building height. The vast majority of this project complies with the zoning as it stands. I mean, there are individuals who may disagree with that zoning, but that zoning is what stands. There are 0 setbacks. There is a 40-foot, 0 on the sides, 40-foot. The rationale for determining the front setback is challenging, and I think is unique in the sense that if this lot was a parking lot, the 43-foot setback that calculates into the average of our building would not exist, and we would be talking pretty close to where we are right now in terms of a setback to the front side. With respect to the gentleman to the south on the construction business, I cannot speak to the alley, but other than, again, 6 units, 12 cars is not a significant impact in any recognizable traffic table. It just isn't. Other than that, thank you again very much for your time, and we'll be here to answer any further questions that you may have.
Okay. We'll now close the public portion of the hearing. Do we have a motion? And a discussion? Don't all rush in here.
Share the wealth on the motions here, guys.
You're the motion man, I guess,
Am
now.
I?
Yeah. Tarred and feathered?
What was the proper address again? It's not 5630, it's what?
It is 5630.
5630 South Curtis Street.
It is 5630. I thought he said he was 5630. Ah, okay. All right, I move to approve PC Resolution 17-2017 concerning the views at Curtis Street Plan Development Overlay located at 5630 South Curtis Street with the condition that the height be limited to 40 feet.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Or any other motions? Amendments?
Discussion.
Discussion?
Yeah, you wanna go down?
Okay, I guess I start down the line here and force you to speak. Go ahead, John.
I have no further comments.
Thank you.
I like the fact that this is a multifamily residential in a mixed-use neighborhood. I think that retail follows rooftops. I think that bringing vibrancy and for-sale residential product to downtown is a good thing. I especially like the elimination of the curb cut on Curtis Street. I think that's important. I do agree that 25 and .23 is not the correct measure for the setback because the existing building is so far set back. I wish that the height variance had been supported by a shadow plane study. I think that the drive lane is odd, but that's going to be more largely market-driven on whether or not people will find that appropriate and find the units appealing to sale. But I don't think that 14 feet is the appropriate setback, and I do agree that 40 feet is probably the right height.
David?
I'm struggling with this a little bit, or a lot, I guess. To me, it seems like the height difference, the setbacks are kind of immaterial in my opinion, just because it just doesn't look like this building fits in the area. It's massive compared to the stuff around it. Just aesthetic-wise, I mean, it looks like a nice building, but look at the buildings around it, it just doesn't have that same character as the buildings surrounding, the neighbors. And, it's even larger than, at least from what I was able to see, it seems like it's larger even than buildings on Curtis that are on Main Street. So I'm not sure what the larger apartment building on Nevada, what the height is, but even that doesn't look to be quite this high. And I know we can talk all day about what the requirements are, but I think we just get back to the character of the downtown area and, you know, that it has to fit in with the downtown and fit in with the, you know, the surrounding uses and the surrounding character. And I just don't think this reaches that level.
Bruce?
With all the land use decisions that we consider, our charge is to weigh the evidence presented against the code and the various plans that have been adopted by the city. As is the case here, it's often the case that we've got the latitude to go to interpret this stuff either way, and you have to weigh the preponderance of evidence, you know, either pro or con. And so I like to start, and I'm going to start on this one with respect to the intent of the PDO regulations, which were outlined in the staff memo, but the purpose of the PDO regulations in Code Section 10-9-1 is to provide a procedure which permits more flexible site design and development than is possible under traditional zone districts while maintaining the land use characteristics of those districts. As we've said before, when we do these kinds of things, this amounts to essentially a deal that we're willing to provide as the city some development flexibility in exchange for certain things that might not otherwise accrue to the city's benefit. And the art form here is to determine individually if we feel we've gotten collectively the city enough value in exchange for what we're giving up. The review standards, again, as identified on Section 10-9-8, suggests that the Planning Commission shall determine if the application meets the provisions of 10-9-5, which we already discussed during the evidentiary part of this hearing. The proposed development must demonstrate special attention to creative, high-quality design and producing a development that reinforces and complements citywide and neighborhood design goals and objectives. Plans that demonstrate such attention can qualify for certain variations from the underlying zone district requirements as detailed in this section. In this instance, what essentially, if we have limited the development to 40 feet, which essentially is in the CA zone already, and if the setbacks are as indicated, the predominant variance here is 14 foot, which to my eye doesn't appear to be at great variance to the other buildings in close proximity. We can talk about mass and so forth. And on the second page of the, I guess this is the plan development overlay schematic, they do at the bottom have the other buildings that are in proximity. So it's, to my mind, difficult to look at each one of these. I mean, if you look at one of these buildings, for example, in comparison to 5650 South Curtis, you know, it's not that much higher. It's not that much more massive. It's a little more massive than 5600 South Curtis. But more to the point, there's something to be said when we talk about retaining the character of the neighborhood. It has to also take into account that the neighborhood has already changed. I mean, the downtown football 10 to 15 years ago, yeah, had all cottages and single families and one stories and what do we call them? What are the ones called on the ones on Louthan? What's the technical term, the style?
Craftsman.
Craftsman, that's the word I was looking for. Anyway, and that's all, that's great. It is, you know, a lot of that remains in that neighborhood, but what also now is in the neighborhood is a lot of infill development that's taken place over the past 10 years. And I don't think it's necessarily our charge to say that we're only going to look at the character of a given block that is divorced or exclusive of other buildings on Sycamore, on Nevada, on whatever, that in fact have elements not entirely dissimilar to what's being proposed here. So to the extent that the comp plan, for example, says we really, really want, under comp plan 8, well, all right, it's dynamic Littleton is section A 1.9 in bold, increasing housing diversity and densities to help enliven the streets and support stores and restaurants. I don't know that it gets much more definitive than that. And then I think as you mentioned down there, we're actually in a residential mixed-use district, which according to the downtown plan says that there are residential office and retail uses with many businesses operated out of former homes. The feel of the district is predominantly residential. There are 2 districts, sub-areas within the district. There's a real variety of stuff that's in this area, and it extends from essentially Santa Fe all the way over to Rio Grande. So it's not, I think, just this one block as far as I'm concerned. Within that context, the policies to implement the downtown neighborhood plan, the land uses on Main Street should be predominantly commercial and residential, so that's fine. The residential mixed use should have both residential and commercial uses while maintaining a diverse residential character, which I think this does. And then the downtown should support a diverse mix of housing options for residents of all ages, incomes, abilities, and family structures. On the other side of the ledger, we can argue that the existing character of the old downtown neighborhood should be preserved, but again, I don't think we're in the old downtown neighborhood sub-area specifically. We're close to it, but we're not in it. And then the height of future buildings in downtown should be respective of the historic scale and character, and we're trying to limit that, in this case, to 40, which is within the CA zone. The deal we're making here is we're providing some variance to the zoning attributes via the use of the PDO. What we're getting in exchange, I think, that's key is we're getting some owner-occupied townhomes that we really do not have in this community. That's consistent with the comprehensive plan and the neighborhood plan. It just is. The other thing that we're getting is less density than otherwise would be allowed on this site. So, you know, in the context of other developments we've seen in this town, if you be careful what you wish for, because if you don't like this, you might get something that starts to get a little bit closer to more mass, use by right, 100 dwelling units per acre, so forth and so on. We would never see that if somebody wants to come in and do that because that's what the CA zone allows. To my mind, and my way of thinking, as an infill project, that does meet the substantial benefit test that Robin mentioned. And on balance, when you weigh all the pluses and minuses, I think this also passes the test, so I'm going to vote for it accordingly. Thanks.
Andrew?
I agree. It's a tremendous improvement on what is there. What is there is nothing special. So I think anything is a tremendous, a parking lot is a tremendous improvement over what is there, aside from maybe the rent. I don't think it's contemporary with the existing neighborhood. The historical style would be appropriate for it. The 14 feet, ironically, doesn't bother me at all. I think that that's a good, it's reasonable within the street. I think it is consistent with the street. That doesn't bother me. What does bother me is the alley between the two and the lack of frontage to Curtis Street and the visual impact as you walk down that street. I would just as soon close off that alley and see a home front there. I do like, and not to confuse terms, I do like the back alley access approach and the elimination of the curb cut on there. So I just don't like that big street right in the middle. I don't think that adds value, and I would definitely say if it did move forward, I would like a significant landscape buffer to protect for a visual impact from that alley. It just looks ugly. It looks like an alley at the end of the day, and we moved it in front of the street. There. So I'm fine with the 14 feet. My biggest problem is that it is a complete loss of mixed use on that parcel. And when you see the success that Terracotta has had and how it draws you north from the downtown area, and Graceful, which I would argue would be a great tenant in a mixed-use facility that had a nice restaurant facility on the first floor, and hopefully you'd honor the intent of Graceful and their business model with that. But them being next door, I think we missed that, and I think that's where the downtown benefit doesn't happen, in that I think Littleton is built backwards in the fact that we have a main street and we don't have a town square, and almost where the costume shop, Greg Reinecke's costume shop, Reinecke Brothers, is really where the town square is. And so I really want to see the downtown area move more north and accommodate for higher density living. I have no problem with the number of units. 6 seems appropriate, 8 seems appropriate if you could make the height variance and the size variance work. But to lose a downtown retail opportunity with this, I think we're kind of missing a big one here. So as I read the mixed use requirements and as I read the documentation and the proposal, I'm probably leaning against it, but my response is not so much I don't think you're on the right path. I do think you're on the right path. I think the project needs to be tweaked to accommodate a better frontage to Curtis Street, a better tie-in with downtown, and then I think the residences up above and the alley access is very much in the right direction for where this should go. But right now, I'd say it's, for me, close but no cigar.
I really appreciate your responses to our questions. A lot of the things that you brought up were very positive. There are a lot of wonderful things about this. I'm very concerned about the character, as was already mentioned by Dave, and it was brought up by one of our public speakers. It's specifically there in the sub-area 4 about our character. You know, we also know that the size of these buildings must be commensurate with the neighboring, and you've got the smaller single stories next to it. You have to look at the relationship of the whole block, which also affects part of the character. And the downtown standards and guidelines also talk about more front-facing, which is a lot what Andrew spoke about. So while I love the idea of adding more residents, and especially because they would be owners, that part is, I think, great. I just can't commiserate it back with some of the other sub-area 4 requirements. And when you look at a PDO, it needs to conform to those requirements. So while I greatly appreciate all this, and I'm like Andrew, I think the direction's right, and all that, and your explanation of the 14-foot actually bothers me less than it did originally too. Again, you had a lot of the positive response there, but it's not quite the character yet. So I am also leaning towards a no.
Jason?
Looking at the context is incredibly important, and in the context of this block, this site is the aberration. You have a massive front setback, a parking lot with no sort of landscape as required by our downtown design standards. And if you were to take out the existing setback of the site, the average setback of the nearby buildings is 15.83 feet to the closest structure, or 20.64 to the wall. And they're asking for 17 feet to the wall and 14 feet to the nearest structure. The two things that the commission is considering tonight, since the motion was with a condition of a 40-foot maximum height, is that front yard setback and whether that setback is appropriate given the context. And the other element is whether the driveway width variance is appropriate. And It appears that both of those are in context with the area, with the added benefit of removing a curb cut, improving the street frontage, improving pedestrian accessibility along the north of Curtis Street, and just generally improving the block versus what is existing.
Thank you. My comments are a few concerns. The width of the driveway was a concern. Your applicant's presentation was a little lean on describing what the heck's going on with this driveway. If I might make a suggestion, get rid of the pipe columns and cantilever your second floor. Make it easier getting into the garages. So the fact that the garage doors are 28 feet apart makes it much easier to get in and out of those garages. The alley was a concern for me from day one, but I'm not holding this against hostage against the development. It's a bad alley, but it's not the applicant's fault. And they were asked to get rid of the curb cut on the street and put it in the alley. Will there be some problems in the alley? Yes. Will there be attempts to drive south into the private areas? Yes. Maybe someday they'll put some barriers up. But the setback issue, I don't have a problem with the front setback. I don't think that the building to be demolished should count against the average setback of that side of the block. This is the second time now we've seen another project a little further to north where this setback issue, the standards of the city is really antiquated and needs to be looked at and needs to be changed. The quality of the architecture, I think it's much better than some of the other dreary alley-loaded, private alley-loaded projects that we see going up towards the east. So I think this project meets the standard of high-quality design. Again, much better than some of the other architecture in the downtown area. Getting rid of the curb cut, also a plus. I always come back to this is a PDO, Plan Development Overlay, which means it overlays the existing zoning. I always come back to the existing zoning, what it allows. What is the use by right? 40-foot height limit, 0 side setbacks, 10% open space. The gentleman with the Brothers Construction Company, tomorrow he could tear his building down, propose a very large building, conform to all the zoning requirements, not come to us, not come to City Council, go directly to zoning and the building department, get his permit, and build the thing. Every other property in this area, whether it be in the CA or the R5, has the exact right to do the same. As Mr. Stallman said, this area is changing. It already has changed and will continue to change with the underlying zoning in place. That's my comments. Any other comments? Seeing none, it's time to vote. Votes in.
The vote is 5-2, and the motion fails.
Thank you. You got the numbers and who voted? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. We'll continue on here. Staff comments?
Couple comments, but first I would like to introduce you to the city's attorney who has started a couple weeks ago, Steve Kemp, who is sitting in the back row here. Just wanted to let you know that. We are still working with Brandon Dittman and Ken Fellman while Mr. Kemp works through getting the Colorado licensure, but he is our permanent city attorney. So,
welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
The only other update I have for you is your next meeting. You do have a couple draft ordinances in front of you, one being about building height.
Oh.
With that, that's all staff
Is
has.
this a study session or a regular meeting?
Regular meeting.
Regular meeting. Oh, heights. How about setbacks? Let's see, and, well, one comment, we do have the city council meeting tomorrow over various issues that affect this planning commission, including looking at priorities for Bellevue Avenue corridor study, light rail stations. I think they're even going to be talking about the zoning, our starting attempt at the zoning rewrite. Anything else that they're going to be talking about?
So yes, tomorrow, City Council is talking about priorities that they want to get started on, and there's a variety of land use related things relative to plans, including the Bellevue plan, including the downtown neighborhood plan, including some of the light rail projects, and moving those forward. So we will know after their conversation tomorrow some direction for community development, and obviously would have an impact to the Planning Commission.
Any commissioner comments? Seeing none, we are adjourned.